Hey everyone, and welcome back. You may have seen there's a new documentary that's just come out on Sky News, just come out about 6 days ago, and it's called Australia, A History by former Prime Minister Tony Abbott. Now, if you've been a viewer of mine, you'll probably know that I'm not the biggest fan of politicians, but I've always found Tony Abbott hard not to like. The man is genuinely very articulate. He's obviously patriotic and passionate about the country, which I believe counts for something these days. And I believe the documentary is worth a watch for anyone wanting to understand a little bit of the history. I have linked it in the description below. It's well made, it's very thoughtful, and it highlights both our wrongdoings and our achievements as well. How we went from a penal colony in 1788 to a modern functioning society or civilization that we've got today. And fair enough, we have come a long way, but there were two moments in that video in particular that stopped me cold. And I want to talk about those two moments in this video today, not to tear the whole video down, but to show why transparency matters more than sentiment. Because if we're going to talk about history, about who we are as a nation, we can't just celebrate what we've built or what we see. We have to be honest about what's changed, what's happened underneath everything. So the first moment is Tony's own reflection on the Crown itself. It's calm, it's measured, and it sounds harmless on the surface, but it's actually one of the most revealing sentences that you'll ever hear from a Prime Minister, or in this case, a former Prime Minister. Let's have a listen to it now.
One constant since 1788 has been the presence of the Crown. Of course, it's a different Crown today than in George III's time, and in Australia the Crown is represented by the Governor-General. Still, it's a form of servant leadership, and it has served us well, and I hope it never changes.
So on the surface, that all sounds fine, right? He's basically saying, look, we've always had the Crown, it's evolved, but it's still doing its job and we're lucky to have it. But just slow down for a moment. Let's have a look. The first line that he says is, one constant since 1788 has been the Crown. Now that's true symbolically, but legally it's not. The Crown of 1788 was the British Crown under George III. Imperial sovereignty, laws were made in London. Now the Crown of 2025 is something entirely different. It's no longer British. It's now Australian. It's a separate legal entity created through a series of legislative changes culminating in the Australia Act of 1986. And in that transformation, which happened over a 13-year period, something fundamental shifted. The Crown didn't vanish, it was absorbed into the machinery of government. The Crown now means the state, the executive power of Australia. So when Abbott says it's a different Crown, well, yes, he's right. But then he follows it up with, I hope it never changes. And see, that's the loop. He admits that it did change, then he tells you to basically just pretend that it didn't. This is emotional continuity wrapped around legal transformation. See, the same name, but we have different meaning. And that's exactly how this illusion is maintained. And the second clip drives this point home. This time it's Tony Abbott interviewing Sam Mostyn. Sam Mostyn's our Governor-General. Now again, there's no hostility here. She's calm, composed, and technically correct in what she's saying, but what she leaves out is what makes this more powerful. Let's have a watch of this little interview.
Since Federation, the Crown has been represented in Australia by the Governor-General. Excellency, I wonder if you could just talk a bit about the role of the monarchy in Australia as a symbol of unity above and beyond politics.
I mean, that certainly is the most important thing about my role. So the Governor-General has and always must be above politics, have no politics, I have no policies to offer, I have no money to dispense. Most people don't understand that the king would never call me to offer advice on how I would do my job or exercise those powers, and I would never contact him through his office to ask for that advice. But this is a uniquely Australian set of arrangements that is underpinned by the continuity and stability of the Crown, but exercised by Australians in this role who are always...
Now that sounds reassuring, doesn't it? The king doesn't interfere, and everything's handled here locally in Australia. Stability. But let's translate that into plain English. She's right. She would not call the king for any advice. But here's why. Because under Section 7 of the Australia Act of 1986, the Crown's power in Australia, or the Crown's powers in Australia, exercised only on the advice of Australian ministers or the Executive Council. In other words, she doesn't ask for advice because she's the one who actually provides advice. The king doesn't tell her what to do. She tells the king, this is what's been done. That's not disrespect to anyone, that's just law. But what it means is that the king has no say in Australian governance anymore. The Crown still exists purely in ceremony, but it's now fully subordinated to ministerial advice. That's the quiet transfer of power that happened by 1986. The Australia Act ended all legal links between the UK and Australia. The British Parliament can't legislate here. The Privy Council can't hear appeals anymore. And the Queen, which is now the King, no longer has any constitutional role in decision making. So when Sam Mostyn says the king would never call me, that's not symbolic, it's quite literal. The law itself forbids it. And when she says, I would never call him and ask, that's because she legally acts in his name, but only under the advice of Australian ministers. That's why this quote is genius. It's so perfectly crafted the way she's worded it. It's true. But it leaves out the entire reason why. Now, none of this is about me taking sides or attacking any particular individual. Tony Abbott in this documentary is trying to tell a positive story about Australia, and that's great. It is a remarkable story, I don't deny that, but this is the issue. When you celebrate the continuity of the Crown without acknowledging how its power base has shifted, you're not teaching real history, you're teaching some kind of watered down comfort. The Crown was once the external authority that kept governments accountable. Now it's the legal shield that those governments act under. And if we can't be transparent about this change, about what happened between 73 and 86, the Royal Style and Titles Act and the 1986 Australia Act, then we can't claim to be teaching truth or the full truth about our constitution, because this isn't about some kind of nostalgia, it's about sovereignty. When the foundations change and nobody talks about it, you end up with citizens pledging allegiance to a system that doesn't actually operate the way they think that it does. I don't believe that that's stability. That's more confusion disguised as tradition. So yeah, watch the documentary. It's worth your time. It is beautifully produced and it'll remind you of what we have achieved as a nation. But when you hear the words continuity of the Crown, remember what that actually means in law. The Crown itself has not endured the test of time unchanged. It's been rewritten from an external monarchy to an internal executive, and that's not rebellion, it's just reality. The least we can do as people who still value any truth is be transparent about what happened. Because pretending everything's fine might make us feel good, but it doesn't make it true. And if we continue to build on any kind of foundation that's not quite stable, or a foundation that we don't understand, we might not like what we find when they start to crack. So if you found the video informative, make sure that you like and subscribe. Make sure you have your notifications turned on. Make sure you put a comment in the boxes below. Are you going to watch this Sky News documentary? Look forward to seeing you in the next video.